They saw us as insects. To the Villari ascendancy, an empire of thought-woven intelligences and city-sized starships, Earth was nothing more than a speck orbiting an unremarkable star. Humanity, barely worth a footnote. Primitive, divided, emotionally unstable. The ascendancy had cataloged thousands of sentient species, many of them with neural networks and civilizations so vast they spanned multiple galaxies. Compared to that, we were just noise. But there was something off. During routine expansion surveys, a Villari scout vessel, Tuval's Whisper, passed through the Sol system. A formality. No need to make contact. Just another atmospheric scan to log into their interstellar archive. The humans didn't even detect them. Not that they would have known what they were seeing. But then it happened. The atmospheric readings returned. Anomalous. The AI core on board flagged the data for review, not because Earth posed any military threat, but because the chemical composition of its atmosphere was, in a word, terrifying. At first, the scientists laughed. An error, surely. The AI must have misread the oxygen levels or misidentified certain compounds. But there was no mistake. Earth's atmosphere was filled with gases that shouldn't coexist in a naturally sustained biosphere. Oxygen, nitrogen, trace elements, and a shockingly high level of free radicals, pollutants, and microscopic particles from what appeared to be combustion. Combustion on an industrial scale. It wasn't the existence of industry that concerned them. Many species built machines. What unsettled the Villari was what these gases meant about human behavior. Species with such atmospheres typically burned resources without pause. That required obsession, desperation, ambition, and perhaps the most dangerous trait of all, a disregard for self-preservation. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to StarBoundApex HFY for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Within days, the data made its way to the Villari Science Synod. A formal investigation was initiated, and the once-dismissed planet, Earth, was elevated to a Watch-class designation. That status had only been assigned 6 times in recorded Villari history, each case ending in either galactic war or total planetary annihilation. The lead sinologist, Prime Seer Varian, issued a classified report to the Ascendancy's High Council. Its contents were sealed, but leaks always find a way. A single line from the report made it into the black market archives of 1,000 outlaw species. The humans are not irrational. They are dangerously rational in a system built on madness. You see, to the Villari and most advanced species, equilibrium was the law of survival. They evolved to avoid extremes, to protect life. But humanity throve in imbalance, pushed boundaries, tested every limit, physical, moral, environmental. Their atmosphere wasn't an error. It was a warning. You don't evolve to live in fire unless you're willing to burn everything. One operative, a synthetic augmented infiltrator from the Arquela Combine, dared to descend into Earth's upper orbit to observe firsthand. What he saw on his visual relays was unsettling. Earth's surface shimmered with electric lights, sprawling cities pulsed with constant activity. Humans didn't sleep as a species. They moved, always. Built, drilled, invented. They'd weaponized the atom, tamed electromagnetic waves, sent machines beyond their solar system. And yet, they still fought among themselves, as though battle was not a tragedy, but an instinct. The infiltrator sent back one final message before losing contact over the region known as the Nevada Desert. They stare into the void of annihilation, and they smile. Within a cycle, the Villari Council convened an emergency session. The vote was close, but decisive. Earth would not be conquered. It would be contained. A quarantine net was proposed, one that would prevent humans from expanding past their system. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Because if humanity ever escaped their atmosphere with their fire intact, they might not stop at the stars. They might burn the galaxy. The decision was made. The Villari Ascendancy, masters of technology and galactic diplomacy, had seen what was coming. A species like humanity, fueled by relentless ambition and the burning desire to surpass every boundary, was a potential existential threat. The Villari had seen civilizations rise and fall, but none quite like this. They had always assumed that advanced life would evolve toward stability and balance. The concept of a species growing stronger in the face of utter chaos was alien to them. The Ascendancy had faced crises before. Cataclysmic events had reshaped galaxies, wiping out entire star systems. But those who survived were always the ones who mastered the art of restraint. That was how civilizations endured. Humanity, however, was different. Their survival wasn't guaranteed by calm deliberation or scientific prowess alone. It was fueled by their audacity, their drive. The Villari did not understand it, and in their eyes, they had no time to try. The Villari High Council's decision to contain humanity was based on a calculation. A full-on war with the human species would be costly. The Villari might eventually win, but they would lose hundreds of thousands of lives, starships, and precious resources. The Villari were not just fighting a war. They would be fighting the unknown. No species had ever come close to defeating them, but humans. They were unpredictable. Unconstrained by any principles of cosmic balance, humanity had a dangerous weapon that few others possessed: sheer willpower. So they did what any pragmatic empire would do. They imposed a quarantine. An invisible shield would be placed around Earth. It would prevent any ships, probes, or even communications from reaching beyond the system. The Villari would keep their distance, watch silently from the void, monitor humanity, and in the event that humanity's unchecked thirst for power reached a dangerous threshold, they would intervene before it could spread any further. But the problem with containment was that it never works. Humanity, for all its flaws, had a way of breaking boundaries. When something stood in their way, they found a way around it. It began with a series of strange events. Earth's greatest minds, scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs, noticed a subtle shift in their long-range communications. Messages that had once bounced cleanly off the moon and into space now seemed to distort. Echoes, faint ripples, like someone was listening in. And then the first anomaly occurred, something that should have been impossible: a faster-than-light signal. It wasn't a transmission meant for them, at least not by human standards. It was a signal carrying a message encrypted in a language the likes of which no human had ever seen. The first signal came from Alpha Centauri, then another from a far-flung star system near the Sagittarius A** black hole. Each signal contained similar signatures, a pattern, a coded pulse, but it wasn't from another human civilization. It was alien, coming from a species far more advanced than humanity's own. But the real mystery was not the signals themselves, it was their timing. When the signals first appeared, they coincided with the opening of a secret government facility located in the Nevada desert, a massive complex known only to a select few. Within the compound, a team of brilliant minds had been tasked with decoding alien languages and probing extraterrestrial phenomena. In that same facility, a project known as Project Echo had begun just a few weeks earlier. An ambitious plan to harness Earth's most dangerous resource, their own atmosphere. The Villari had feared the human atmosphere, how it was made up of toxic gases, pollutants, and volatile compounds. But humans weren't afraid. Instead, they embraced it. Project Echo aimed to reverse engineer Earth's atmosphere and use it to power orbital stations and even experimental faster-than-light engines. The potential for harnessing their atmosphere seemed like an impossible dream, until the day the first successful prototype was launched into the upper atmosphere. Within hours, the human atmosphere generators had reached their target altitude, opening up a bridge to other worlds, worlds the Villari had kept hidden from humanity. The quantum fluctuations caused by this breakthrough inadvertently interacted with the alien signals in the exact way the Velari had feared. The Earth itself, with its chaotic energy and volatile chemicals, had become a beacon, but not for the Velari, for something far more terrifying. In the depths of the Velari intelligence core, a rogue faction of technocrats began to see the writing on the wall. They had underestimated humanity's potential, just as they had underestimated the power of raw, unrefined energy. The signals from other star systems were no coincidence. They were a warning, a summons. What had begun as a routine atmospheric scan by the Velari had turned into a cascade of unforeseen consequences. The atmospheric technology humanity had unwittingly developed had begun to open portals, cracks in the very fabric of space-time. Alien species had become aware of Earth's dangerous potential, but they were not the only ones watching. And now something was coming. The signal had changed. It wasn't just a cryptic string of alien codes anymore. What had once been a series of garbled, untranslatable bursts of electromagnetic radiation had, over time, evolved. The signal patterns had begun to resonate with humanity's own technological pulses. It was no longer just something humans received. It was something they answered. Project Echo, which had initially been designed to harness Earth's volatile atmosphere for energy, had inadvertently triggered a resonance cascade. This event sent a pulse out into the cosmos, a wave of energy that stretched beyond the Sol system and into the intergalactic void. As this wave rippled through space, it created a series of quantum disturbances that disrupted the delicate balance of galactic communication networks. The Velari had once thought of Earth as insignificant, just another young species in a corner of the galaxy, ripe for surveillance and containment. But now, as the signal became clearer, a new understanding began to dawn upon them. The humans had done something unthinkable. They had begun to connect. The alien entities, the ones who had first sent the signal, were not simply observing. They were responding. They had been aware of humanity long before the Earth had even dreamed of venturing into the stars. The Velari had not accounted for this. They had believed that humanity was an insignificant player on the galactic stage. But this discovery shook them to their core. And it was too late to stop it. As humanity began to decode the alien signals, they unknowingly entered a dangerous game. It wasn't just an interaction of two civilizations. It was an invitation to something far older. A civilization, buried in the furthest corners of the galaxy, that had been waiting, dormant, for the right species to trigger their ancient beacon. And now, humanity was that species. The Velari, aware of the escalating situation, scrambled to respond. The Ascendancy's Council convened in emergency sessions to discuss the implications of the Earth signal. If the humans continued to unravel the signal's mysteries, they might open a gateway to something beyond the scope of even the most advanced civilizations. The Velari understood one fundamental truth about cosmic order. Some knowledge was never meant to be discovered. Some doors were better left unopened. But humans, they didn't know fear. At least, not in the way other species did. They were driven by curiosity, by an unrelenting need to explore, to reach out to the unknown. When they finally cracked the alien signal's encryption, what they discovered was a map, a star map. The map detailed a pathway that led to an ancient star system far beyond the outer rim of the galaxy, a place where the laws of physics itself seemed to bend, where ancient technologies from a bygone age lay dormant. Humanity had found their next destination. However, the Velari weren't the only ones watching. As Earth began to venture deeper into this newly discovered pathway, a third party, far older, far darker, had taken notice. In the deepest recesses of the galaxy at the edge of the void, the Zrath coalition stirred. The Zrath were a forgotten race, once great and powerful, now reduced to whispers in the dark corners of the universe. They had once ruled an empire that spanned several galaxies, known for their cold, calculating nature. But their downfall had been as spectacular as their rise, their power crumbling when they unlocked something they weren't supposed to, something that broke their reality. The Zrath were drawn to Earth's signal the moment it had sent out into the void. Unlike the Velari, they didn't consider humanity's presence to be a threat. Instead, they saw it as an opportunity to reclaim what they had lost. The Zrath had never forgotten the cradle of creation, a long-abandoned realm where ancient gods of technology and destruction had once walked. This place, the Nexus, was the source of the Zrath's greatest power and the key to their return to prominence. And Earth, with its stubborn nature and its broken atmosphere, had just unlocked the way. The map humanity had discovered wasn't just a navigation tool. It was a rallying cry, a beacon to those who would exploit the galaxy's deepest secrets. The Velari, though technologically superior, were too few to guard against the forces that were now gathering. They had underestimated humanity, yes, but their true mistake had been failing to account for the other forces lying dormant in the cosmos. While humanity continued its efforts to decode the map and plan their first expedition beyond the solar system, they were oblivious to the dangers lurking beyond their reach. The Velari, now in a race against time, scrambled to find a solution, but they were torn. Should they warn humanity, or was it too late to stop the inevitable? The first group of humans, scientists, engineers, and explorers, launched a ship built with the very technology that had once been dismissed as primitive, their own atmosphere-harnessing engines. This ship, named the Arcadia, was the first of its kind, and it was designed not just to travel beyond the system, but to open the doorway to whatever lay on the other side of the map. As the Arcadia breached the edge of the solar system, the Velari acted. They launched a countermeasure, a massive blockade, a field of energy that was designed to prevent any human ship from traveling beyond their borders. But the humans had anticipated this. They were already prepared. The humans didn't just have their own ships, they had allies. The blockade loomed ahead. The Velari had launched it in desperation, a field of energy so vast and impenetrable that no human ship would be able to pierce through. It spanned the entirety of the Sol system, a shimmering wall of force intended to stop humanity from venturing beyond their borders. The Velari believed they could halt the human ascent right then and there. It was an impenetrable defense, and they believed it was the last line of protection before the true horrors of the galaxy began to unfold. But they underestimated the very thing they had dismissed for so long: human ingenuity. The Arcadia, humanity's first deep space ship capable of traveling beyond the Sol system, had been designed with one thing in mind: breaking barriers, and that was exactly what it did. The ship had been equipped with the most advanced technology available, human technology, derived from their own atmosphere scanning experiments. It was a combination of quantum propulsion and atmospheric energy manipulation, the kind of tech that should have been impossible to perfect in such a short time. But humans had done it. Their sheer will to explore had given them the power to push the limits of their own reality. As the Arcadia approached the edge of the blockade, something remarkable happened. The field of energy began to waver, pulsing as if reacting to the ship's presence. It wasn't just that the ship was powerful enough to challenge it. It was that the field itself was sensing something it couldn't comprehend. The ship was not just a vessel. It was a beacon of chaos, powered by the raw, unpredictable forces of Earth's atmosphere. The Velari had predicted that humans would use their atmosphere-derived technology to their advantage, but they hadn't counted on the ship's unexpected resonance. It was as if the Arcadia was amplifying the same energy signatures that the Velari had long avoided. The result was catastrophic for their defense system. For the first time, the Velari felt the weight of humanity's influence in real time. The energy field around the blockade began to ripple, distorting. It wasn't just weakening, it was fading. The scientists aboard the Arcadia, in a strange mixture of disbelief and awe, watched as the once impenetrable barrier began to dissolve. This was no ordinary breach. The Velari's carefully constructed defense was unraveling in front of their eyes. The humans had found the key to breaking through. But it wasn't just the Velari that had been watching. The ripples caused by the Arcadia's resonance reached further than anyone could have anticipated. Beyond the Sol system, Across the vast and unfathomable distance between stars, something had stirred. The Zrath coalition had been waiting, their ancient eyes always watching the fabric of space. When the first signs of the human breach appeared, the Zrath had already begun moving. Their ships, once lost in the darkness of space, emerged like shadows from the deep, drawn to the energy disturbance caused by humanity's efforts to unlock the galaxy's deepest secrets. In the Zrath fleet, there was a feeling of unease. Something dark was awakening, something even they could not fully comprehend. The ancient gods of destruction, the ones who had fallen silent eons ago, were calling out to the Zrath once more. The signal sent by the humans had resonated not just through space, but through time itself. The Zrath had once used the Nexus, that ancient realm of power, to fuel their empire, but in their arrogance, they had opened a portal, one that had led them to the very edge of the universe, where they encountered forces far more terrifying than they had ever anticipated. And now those forces were waking. Humanity had accidentally reactivated something far beyond their understanding. The map they had discovered was not just a way to explore unknown regions. It was a way to call back the ancient and powerful beings who had been trapped in the Nexus, a call that could not be ignored. As the Arcadia breached the blockade and passed into the unknown, the Zrath's ancient war machines began to stir. Their fleets, once dormant, came alive with terrifying precision. Their ships, constructed from technologies lost to the ages, were a marvel of both beauty and destruction. But what made them even more formidable was not just their weapons. It was their knowledge. They knew what humanity had unleashed. In a dark chamber aboard the flagship of the Zrath fleet, the Council of the Zrath met. Their leader, a figure cloaked in the ancient, foreboding robes of their kind, looked out at the star systems ahead. His voice, heavy with centuries of experience, broke the silence. "We have waited long enough," he said, his tone reverberating in the chamber. "Let us remind the humans what it means to awaken powers they cannot control." But the Zrath were not alone. The Velari, seeing the massive Zrath fleet emerge from the darkness, knew the crisis had escalated beyond their control. The Velari had no choice but to engage. However, their intervention would be complicated by an unsettling reality. The Zrath were not merely a threat to humanity. They were a threat to all civilizations that had ever touched the Nexus. They were the ones who had once broken it. And now, with humanity unknowingly acting as the catalyst, the Nexus was calling back its creators. The fate of the galaxy, and perhaps the entire universe, was now in the hands of a species that had never even considered the full extent of its potential. Humanity had sparked something they were ill-prepared to handle, and as the Arcadia pushed further into the unknown, a countdown began. Time was no longer on their side. But humanity wasn't just up against the Zrath or the Velari. The stakes had become far bigger than anyone could have imagined. Now, a race to control the fate of the universe had begun, and humanity's place in that race was one that would reshape everything. What would happen when they reached the heart of the Nexus? Would humanity be able to wield the power they had unlocked? Or would they too be consumed by the ancient forces they had dared to disturb? The Arcadia surged ahead, its sleek form cutting through the void like a harbinger of humanity's future. But as the ship drifted deeper into the unknown, it became apparent that there was something far more sinister unfolding. The Zrath fleet, once a scattered collection of ancient warships, now moved in a coordinated, almost predatory fashion, closing in on the Arcadia. The Velari, their temporary allies, had little choice but to fall back, unwilling to face the overwhelming might of the Zrath. The humans had unknowingly triggered a galactic awakening, drawing the attention of those whose knowledge and power surpassed anything humanity could have conceived. The Nexus, the source of all these cosmic disturbances, was no ordinary phenomenon. It was an ancient, invisible realm hidden between the fabric of space and time, where the very essence of existence itself was warped. For centuries, it had remained dormant, its secrets buried under layers of forgotten histories. But now, humanity had disturbed the delicate balance, and the reverberations were felt across the stars. As the Arcadia navigated through the endless black, its sensors began to flicker. Energy readings spiked, and the ship's AI, known as TESS, struggled to keep up with the increasing complexity of the data flooding in. The human crew, a mix of military personnel and scientific minds, was on edge. They had never seen anything like this. Nothing in their training, nothing in their research had prepared them for the sheer scale of what they were encountering. The ship's lead scientist, Dr. Emily Voss, stood before the command deck, staring at the data pouring in from the scanning systems. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had always known there was something out there, something beyond the stars, waiting to be uncovered. But this was far beyond anything she had imagined. Her voice broke the silence as she turned toward the captain. "Captain, the energy fluctuations are unprecedented. It's like the very laws of physics are being bent. We're getting spatial distortions in real time." The captain, John Callahan, gripped the edge of his console, his knuckles turning white, his brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the readings. He had trained for combat, for survival. But this was something different, something terrifying. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice steady despite the growing tension in his mind. "We've crossed a line we don't understand. We need to find a way to." His words were interrupted by a sudden, violent shake that reverberated through the ship. The entire crew lurched, their bodies pushed forward as if they were caught in the grip of an unseen hand. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the hull groaned under the pressure. The Arcadia was caught in the grip of something much larger than any of them could have anticipated. Dr. Voss stumbled toward the main console, her face pale. "Captain, the Nexus, it's coming alive. I can feel it. Something ancient is stirring." Just as the words left her lips, the ship's external cameras captured a sight that sent a chill down everyone's spine. The Zrath fleet had closed in, surrounding the Arcadia in a near-perfect formation. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, dark, and crawling with ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. These were not mere warships. These were temples of destruction, their very essence tied to the ancient Nexus. As the Arcadia tried to maneuver, the energy disturbances grew stronger, almost as if the Zrath ships were feeding off the chaos the humans had unleashed. It wasn't just a battle for control of the stars anymore. It was a battle for control of the universe itself. The Zrath were not just looking to destroy. They were looking to reclaim the power of the Nexus, the source of all that was hidden, all that was forbidden. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the Arcadia's comm system. It was in a language no human had ever heard before, a deep guttural sound that resonated through the ship's systems, vibrating in the bones of every crew member. It was the voice of the Zrath commander, a being of immeasurable age and power, speaking to them from his flagship. "This is the end of your journey, humans. You have dared to trespass on what is not yours. You have awakened the Nexus, and with it the old gods stir once more. You will be destroyed. Your species will be erased from existence, as it was meant to be." A chill washed over the crew. The Nexus wasn't just an unknown force. It was alive, and it had a will. The Zrath knew this. They had always known it, and they had been the ones to control it for millennia. But now, humanity had inadvertently unleashed something that even the Zrath feared. Dr. Voss turned to Callahan, her voice trembling but resolute. "We can't just fight this with weapons. We need to understand what the Nexus really is. We need to know how to control it, or it will control us." Callahan looked at her, his expression a mix of determination and disbelief. "And how exactly do we do that?" "We have to reach the heart of the Nexus, the place where everything connects. If we can get there, we might be able to." Another violent tremor interrupted her, and the entire ship shuddered violently as a wave of cosmic energy slammed into the Arcadia, causing the crew to brace themselves. The ship was being pulled, slowly but surely, toward the center of the cosmic storm. Outside, the Zrath warships loomed, their weapons primed. Humanity had ventured too far. The stakes had escalated beyond anything they could control. The question wasn't whether humanity could fight their way out. It was whether they could even survive long enough to understand the true power they had awoken. The Arcadia was no longer just a ship. It was now the catalyst for a galaxy-altering event. The Zrath, watching from a distance, prepared for their final strike. They had held their power for centuries. They were the ancient ones, the harbingers of the Nexus's will, and they would not let a young, untested species like humanity stand in their way. As the Arcadia drifted toward the heart of the storm, something deep within its hull began to hum. The ship was awakening to a power it didn't fully understand. The Nexus had been unshackled, and humanity was about to learn whether they could wield its power, or whether it would consume them all. The countdown had begun, and as the Zrath tightened their grip, the question remained, could humanity survive the greatest test of all? The Arcadia's hull vibrated with an intensity that felt like the ship itself was on the verge of shattering. The cosmic storm outside had grown violent, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart by unseen hands. The Nexus was no longer just a concept. It was an all-consuming force, wrapping its tendrils around the ship and dragging it toward the heart of the anomaly. Inside, the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, but it was clear they were powerless against the raw energies that were now assaulting them. Captain Callahan's voice was steady, though it was clear that he was trying to suppress the panic building within him. Prepare for the worst, people, but we're not giving up. Not yet. His words resonated through the command deck, though it was becoming harder to hear above the constant thrum of the Nexus's energies. Dr. Voss, still standing at her station, stared at the fluctuating readings, her mind racing. "We don't have much time," she muttered, barely audible. The Zrath had the power to annihilate them within moments, but the real threat lay in the Nexus itself. Humanity had triggered something ancient, and now it was consuming them. One of the crew members, Lieutenant Tara Rhodes, turned toward the captain. "Sir, we've lost power to the main engines. The ship is being pulled in. We can't fight this. We'll be caught in the gravitational pull of the Nexus if we don't find a way to stop it." Callahan's face tightened, the weight of their situation bearing down on him like a vice. "We need to focus. We've got one chance, and it's coming fast. Dr. Voss, we need a way to sever the ship's connection to the Nexus. Can we tap into its core energy, find a way to disrupt the field?" Dr. Voss paused, eyes flickering over the data that flowed in faster than she could process. The storm of energy outside the ship seemed to pulse, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. The Nexus wasn't just a force, it was an intelligence, ancient and malevolent. Her hands moved over the controls, desperation driving her actions. "I don't know if we can sever the connection. The Nexus is alive, it's feeding off us. But there's something." She paused, her gaze locking on an ancient symbol that had appeared on the ship's sensors, the same symbol that had adorned the Zrath ships. "It's tied to the Zrath. The Nexus. This is their doing. They've bound it to their will." Before she could explain further, the ship was rocked by another violent tremor. The crew was thrown from their feet as a burst of cosmic energy exploded from the heart of the Nexus, sending a ripple through the very fabric of space. For a moment, the ship was lost in a void of absolute darkness, the stars outside blinking out one by one as the Arcadia was plunged into an eerie silence. The Zrath fleet, hovering in the distance, had begun their final assault. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, an unholy symphony of destruction. The Nexus had woken, and it was no longer just a tool for the Zrath. It was their master, guiding them, driving them toward their ultimate goal, to wipe humanity from existence, to erase their very memory from the stars. "Captain," Dr. Voss said, her voice urgent, "if we don't sever the connection soon, the Zrath will succeed. The Nexus will consume everything. We're inside it now. We need to make contact with its core, if it has one. It might be the only way to stop it." Callahan's jaw clenched. "We're out of options. We've got no choice." But just as he gave the order to initiate their desperate maneuver, An eerie hum filled the ship. It was coming from deep within the hull. A low, vibrating resonance that seemed to resonate with the very bones of the crew. Then, a voice. Not human. Intruders. It echoed across the comm system, though it wasn't coming from the Zrath fleet. This was something else. The words seemed to pulse, like the heartbeat of a living entity, deep and ancient. You have disturbed the balance of the Nexus. You will cease to exist, as all who have trespassed before you. Dr. Voss's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard tales, myths, whispers of the Nexus's true nature, that it was not simply a cosmic force, but an entity, an ancient intelligence that existed beyond space and time, an intelligence that controlled the fate of entire civilizations. She knew it now. They weren't just fighting the Zrath. They were fighting something far more dangerous, something older, something that had existed long before the Zrath had even evolved. We need to focus, Callahan snapped, trying to shake the fear from his voice. Voss, is there a way to communicate with it? Something that can stop it. But Dr. Voss was already deep in thought. The connection to the Nexus was becoming stronger, more intense. It was reaching out to them. And somehow, they had tapped into it. The question now was whether they could control it, or whether it would destroy them. Suddenly, the Arcadia jolted again. A strange portal began to form just ahead of the ship, a swirling vortex of pure energy. The Zrath ships had halted in their advance, their weapons silent. They were watching, waiting. Something was happening, something that even they hadn't expected. "This is it," Dr. Voss whispered, her voice trembling. "We have one shot at this. If we don't get to the core of the Nexus, if we don't control it, everything is over." The portal's swirling energy began to pulse more intensely, the center of the void becoming clearer. They were being pulled in, sucked into the heart of the Nexus. As the Arcadia drifted closer, a strange sensation washed over the crew. Time itself seemed to slow, the entire universe feeling bent, warped, as though the very nature of reality was being reshaped. The Zrath's fleet began to move again, but this time, they were fleeing, retreating as if afraid of what was happening. "Why are they running?" Tara Rhodes asked, her voice filled with confusion. "They know," Dr. Voss said, her face pale. "The Nexus has a will of its own. It's not just a weapon or a force. It's something alive. Something older than even the Zrath." Callahan's voice was firm, his focus sharp. "We don't have time to figure it out. We have to stop it. Now." As the Arcadia was drawn into the heart of the Nexus, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The Zrath had underestimated humanity once before. Now, humanity was facing an even greater force, one that could unravel everything they had fought for. But one thing was certain. The Arcadia's crew had made it this far, and if they were to survive, they would have to face the unknown and learn how to wield its power against the very forces that sought their destruction. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Arcadia's crew was now inside the heart of the Nexus, a vast, shifting realm that seemed to exist outside the boundaries of space and time. The very nature of reality twisted around them, pulling them into a chaotic dance with the universe itself. The ship's systems flickered, unable to comprehend the distorted field of energy that surrounded them. Their once rigid understanding of the cosmos was being shattered, piece by piece, as they plunged deeper into the center of the anomaly. The Zrath fleet, once a looming threat, had retreated to the fringes of the Nexus, unwilling to risk the full fury of what was to come. The Arcadia had unknowingly breached the very fabric of the anomaly. They had triggered something ancient, something alive. The Zrath were not the only ones who had miscalculated. Inside the Arcadia, a low hum filled the air, resonating through the ship's walls. It was the same hum they had felt earlier, but now it was stronger, more aggressive. The crew felt a weight pressing down on them, as though the Nexus itself was aware of their presence. Their every breath seemed to carry a heavy cost, as though their bodies were being tested, pulled apart by the very fabric of reality. but the human spirit was resilient. Captain Callahan stood tall on the command deck, his gaze unwavering as he looked at the swirling vortex before them. His hands gripped the console tightly. "We're not backing down," he muttered under his breath, though the weight of their situation was almost too much to bear. Dr. Voss's voice broke through the tension, her words both calculated and urgent. "The Nexus is not just a cosmic force. It is a sentient being. It's been waiting for something to finally challenge its grip on the universe. And now, we've awakened it." A chill swept through the ship as the crew turned their attention to the swirling mass in front of them. The center of the Nexus was a thing of unfathomable power, a roiling mass of light and shadow that distorted the very air around it. It seemed alive, its tendrils reaching out toward the Arcadia, trying to pull it deeper into its heart. This was no longer just a battle of technology or will. It was a battle of survival against something older than the stars themselves. The hum grew louder, and suddenly, a voice echoed through the ship. "Intruders." It was the same voice they had heard earlier, but this time it was different. It was clearer, more personal, as though it had taken notice of the humans who dared challenge it. The voice had a presence to it, something ancient, cold, and unyielding. "You have come, but you will not leave." Dr. Voss's hands flew across her console, desperately trying to stabilize the ship's systems. She could feel the Nexus pushing against the Arcadia, trying to tear it apart, break its will. But there was something strange about the energy now. It wasn't just a destructive force, it was alive. And it was learning, adapting. "Captain," she called, her voice trembling with the weight of her discovery. "The Nexus, it's testing us. It knows our every move before we make it. It's not just a force of nature, it's a mind. And it wants us to fight. It wants to see how far we will push it." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, fear creeping into their expressions. They had fought against this wrath. They had fought against impossible odds. But this was something completely different. They were up against a force of nature that was intelligent, ancient, and indifferent to their survival. And yet, for all its power, it had never encountered something like humanity. A species that fought to the bitter end, no matter the odds. Tara Rhodes, the ship's lieutenant, stepped forward, her voice firm. "We've never backed down before. We won't start now. We need to sever the connection to the Nexus. Whatever it is, however it works. We need to reclaim control." Callahan nodded, his face grim. "Dr. Voss, is there anything we can do? Can we reverse the process?" Voss stared at the display, her mind working furiously to piece together the fragments of understanding she had gathered. "There might be a way, but we'll have to disrupt the core. It's not just a power source. It's a nexus in itself, a convergence point for energy across the cosmos. To destroy it, we'll need to breach the core of the Nexus, and once we do, it could either sever the connection or collapse the entire structure." She paused, her voice taking on an edge of fear. "But the repercussions, no one knows what will happen if we destroy it. It could unravel everything, or it could release a force that is far worse than the Zrath." Tension gripped the crew. The weight of their decision hung over them. If they succeeded, they might save the galaxy. But if they failed, they would be trapped forever in the heart of an ancient being, a prison of time and space that would consume them whole. "Do we have a choice?" Callahan asked, his voice steady. "No," Dr. Voss replied, determination in her eyes. "We do what humanity does best. We fight." With that, the crew set to work. The Arcadia's weapons, once designed to defend against enemy ships, now became their primary tool to break through the heart of the Nexus. The ship's core systems were tied into the anomaly, feeding off it, growing stronger the closer they got to the center. But now, they had to use that connection, to sever it, to destroy it from within. The heart of the Nexus pulsed with unbearable intensity as the crew activated the ship's energy core, channeling everything they had into one final, desperate strike. Lights flared across the ship as the Arcadia's systems roared to life. They had no time to waste. And then it happened. The entire ship shuddered as the Arcadia's core came into contact with the Nexus's core. The ship groaned under the pressure, the hull creaking as though it were on the verge of breaking apart. The void around them trembled, the Nexus itself recoiling, like a wounded animal. The Zrath ships, once retreating, now approached once more, but it was too late. The Nexus' power, once a controlling force, was beginning to fracture, and in that moment, humanity had struck at the heart of the beast. As the Nexus exploded into a burst of energy, the entire ship was consumed in light. Time and space bent, the ship teetering on the brink of non-existence, before suddenly snapping back into reality, leaving the Arcadia floating in an empty void. The Nexus was gone. The Zrath had been defeated, and humanity had proven something far greater than just their survival. They had proven that even against the darkest forces of the universe, nothing could crush their spirit. Callahan looked out at the empty void, his expression one of awe. We did it. But as the crew began to realize what had transpired, a final message came through the Arcadia's comm system, a message from a voice they had never heard before. The Nexus is not gone. It was merely a test. The crew froze. Their victory. Had it been earned, or had it been a test for something far worse to come? The question hung in the air, unanswered, leaving the crew with one final, lingering truth. The universe had just begun to show them its true power. And humanity. They had only just started to fight back. What lies ahead for humanity? What is the true nature of the Nexus? And are there more tests in store for the species that dared to challenge the stars? Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. The universe has just opened its doors. Will you be ready?